Hello inner tubes, different spokes here with a weird comparison for those of you looking for a high quality 500cc bike. So you're looking for a motorcycle, something versatile, fun but not too intimidating, stylish and high quality, maybe something to commute on or go for a sporty blast on the back roads, even go touring on. Maybe you're a beginner or an experienced rider who doesn't need a mountain of power, just enough to outrun traffic at a light or keep up with your friends on the weekend, and you don't want to spend a fortune on a big BMW or Harley or a hyper-fast Ducati or KTM. Maybe you're a Euro rider with your A2 license who's limited to 47 horsepower and wants something reliable with an extensive dealer network. Let's see, how about maybe... oh wait, Honda has you covered. I rode and reviewed a lot of bikes this year, but 3 of them fit your needs perfectly, have the exact same 471cc engines, and are some of the highest selling bikes in the world. Honda has managed to take this parallel twin engine and build 4 different bikes around it. We'll look at 3 of them. We won't look at the CB500X since I didn't ride this bike this year and it's the most dated model of the group. So the contenders or the candidates are the Honda Rebel 500, the CBR500R, and the CB500X. Let's go through the advantages and disadvantages of each and see how they stack up. Each bike has the same engine with the same horsepower and torque numbers, 47 horsepower and about 31 pound-feet of torque. So straight line performance on these 3 bikes is similar. The 500X weighs about 430 pounds, the CBR comes in at 419 pounds wet, while the Rebel surprisingly undercuts them both, coming in at 414 pounds. They're all strong and light enough to be entertaining, but not so fast that they'll be scary or too dangerous for a beginner. The power delivery is smooth and linear without being peaky. These bikes will not surprise you or catch you off guard with a sudden rush of power when you're not ready. They're powerful enough to get away from traffic or keep up with your buddies on a group ride, but they won't rip your arms out of your shoulders when you whack the throttle open. The one place they won't keep up with bigger bikes is in acceleration. I found myself revving hard to keep up on group rides with larger bikes, but if you don't do this kind of riding very often, you will never notice the difference. If you're short of inseam, then the Rebel is your bike with a 27.2-inch seat height. The pegs on the Rebel are in a natural mid-control position. If you're shorter, they'll work well. If you have long legs, you may feel a bit cramped, but either way, your legs are in front of you. The handlebars are wide and swept back, good for comfort and leverage. This bike's low center of gravity makes it easy to control at parking lot speeds. One thing that I was surprised about with this bike was how little wind blast the rider gets at speed, even without a windshield. The large headlight and the seating position more in the bike rather than on it probably account for this. There is little wind on your chest, but your helmet and legs still get the air. Finally, the suspension soaks up road irregularities well. Even though the rear shocks have limited travel, only 3.8 inches, I didn't really feel the rough pavement that much. It's a comfy and civilized ride. The CBR500R puts you in a sport touring riding position, less aggressive than a pure sport bike but slightly more aggressive than a naked bike. The pegs are up and back, the clip-on bars are low but not ultra low as on a super bike or a super sport. You could travel long distances on this bike like you could on a VFR 800. The fairing provides good wind protection for your legs on cold days and keeps the air blast off your chest, although you still get air on your helmet. Being an adventure bike guy, I like the CB500X riding position best. This is a pretty neutral, sit up high, legs underneath you type of position, which is comfortable and allows the rider to stand up on the bike when off-road. This is the riding position that has replaced the sport touring position on the CB500R as the preferred nimble touring bike position. Throughout the 90s, the VFR 800 was seen as the perfect fast bike for touring. Now it's more about the BMW style adventure tourer. So the CB500X has the best wind protection on the upper body and probably the most neutral and comfortable riding position, which allows you to look far down the road. It's got an adjustable windscreen with the option of getting an even taller one. You're in good control of the bike, both on and off pavement. The one drawback of this riding position is the high seat height, which is 32.7 inches. I can flat foot it, but my wife, who is 5'7", is on the balls of her feet. If you're shorter than she is, you're tippy-toeing, which compromises control of the bike, especially at slow speeds when you have to put a foot down or paddle backwards. When you have longer suspension for rough roads or going off pavement, you have to make compromises. Let's talk about handling. First of all, the Rebel loses this category. I don't want to come across as a cruiser hater, but the truth is that when you shape a bike like a cruiser and slam that seat as low as you can, you're reducing cornering clearance and suspension travel, as well as taking weight off the front wheel. This type of shape will always compromise cornering speeds and front wheel grip. The Rebel is always going to fall behind in corners where it just can't lean as far as the other two bikes here. This is not to say that it's a bad handling bike. The thing handles quite well as long as you add the qualifier for a cruiser. It will keep up fine with other cruisers. The front suspension is well sorted, although not adjustable. The front tire is fat, which slows down turn-in, but increases stability in tracking through a turn. Because of its fat front tire, the bike can also roll over obstacles like streetcar tracks with little effort. If you're into cruisers and are willing to accept the handling limitations they bring, you will find this to be a perfectly well-sorted bike that handles predictably and can hustle as well as most other cruisers. It just won't keep up with a sportier model like the CB500R. Is the CBR a pure sport bike? In short, no. It's a bit heavy and the suspension is too soft to corner hard around a racetrack and push it to the limit. However, this is a bike that is perfect for blasting around back roads at fun but not extreme speeds. There are faster and sharper bikes than this one available out there, but unless you're going to the track, you're not going to be able to use those bikes to their full potential. At normal, fun, twisty road speeds, this bike will keep up just fine with the hardcore crowd and keep you more comfortable to boot. As I said in my individual review of this bike, if you're riding so fast on the road that you are beyond this bike's performance envelope, you're taking risks you shouldn't be taking. I don't care how good you are, if you're coming around a blind corner too fast and see a deer or broken down car in the road when you're at full lean angle, you're going to have a problem. If that's how fast you want to ride, then get a CBR500R and take it to the track. As for the rest of you who want to ride sporty on a well-built bike that looks good and is comfortable and stable in a turn, you won't be disappointed with this bike. It soaks up bumps, tracks predictably in a turn, and generally doesn't do anything that will buck you off or endanger you. And your insurance premium will be much lower than on a 600. It's not flickable, but it is solid and predictable, which is more important on the road, especially with a beginner rider. And then comes the CB500X, which handles somewhere in between the other two. It is 90% as solid on the road as its sporty CBR cousin, and by far the most capable of the three 500s off pavement. This bike handles well in every situation, as adventure bikes are wont to do. Because it's taller than the CBR, it flicks slightly slower, and because of the longer suspension, it feels slightly less stable in fast turns. But this is something you will not notice unless you're really pushing the envelope. The truth is that ridden properly, this bike can handle anything any road can throw at it at reasonable speeds. You can keep up with anyone on this bike while being comfortable and gliding over the roughest roads. The sporty CBR soaks up road imperfections well, but this bike takes it to a whole new level. And when the pavement ends, this is your best choice by far. You can stand and even get a little air on this thing, although I wouldn't ride it like an enduro. I'm pretty old school, so I believe that when you buy a bike, you should be able to use it for every purpose. That's why I ride an adventure bike, because modern ADV bikes can and should be able to cruise, commute, sport ride, go off-road, and tour. My choice of bike among these three would be the CB500X, because it's the Swiss Army knife of the bunch, and because I spend a lot of time on gravel and some time on dirt. However, the question is, could one of the other two bikes perform all of these tasks as well? Let's look at the Rebel. Obviously, it's the best one for a relaxed cruise. The laid-back seating position and retro cool looks of this bike make it the best choice for a chill ride. Can you commute on it? Of course. It's small, nimble, and at 414 pounds, the lightest of this bunch, so it's easy to control in traffic. The fat tires eat up the bumps, bad pavement, and streetcar tracks in the city, and it's small enough to slip through the traffic. The one drawback for commuting on this bike is that you sit so low that it's harder to see over the traffic, and more importantly, for traffic to see you. Can you tour on the Rebel? You can get an easily attachable Honda windshield and highway pegs if you're going long distance on this bike. You can also put some saddlebags on it and strap a bag to the bag seat. You can totally tour in comfort on this bike. The only drawback it has in the touring department is the smaller fuel tank. At only 11.4 liters, it is stylish looking but a bit small for serious touring. If you're going to tour on this bike, you will have to plan ahead when riding through places where gas stations are scarce. As far as sport riding or off-roading, this bike is not really built for that. It'll do it as any bike will, but there are better bikes for those activities. The CBR500R is a street-oriented sporty bike. It's a good bike for some spirited street riding, and being narrow would make a good commuter. The seating position is higher than the Rebel, but not so high that a shorter rider would be intimidated. At 419 pounds, it is not the lightest bike in this class, and the narrow clip-on bars require some muscle to maneuver at slow speeds, but once moving it is easy to control. I love the wind protection provided by the fairing, especially for your legs. In colder climates, this bike will extend your riding season by keeping the wind off you. The CBR is great for touring, and the suspension, which is a bit too soft for hardcore sport riding, comes into its own and soaks up rough roads and bumps beautifully. This is obvious to most of you, but I wouldn't take this bike off pavement. Any bike can tear up a gravel road, but when your bike has a fairing, anytime you drop it will be expensive if you damage the fairing. So keeping this bike on pavement is probably best. Overall, this is a very capable multi-use bike on paved roads. Let's talk about the looks of these three bikes. Obviously, they are totally different from each other, and which one you like best totally depends on your style of riding. If you like cruisers, then the Rebel is your bike. If you like sport bikes, the CBR500R is going to be your choice, and if you like ADV bikes, the CB500X is the best one for you. What I can say about all three is that in their respective categories, they are all great looking bikes next to their competition. The Rebel competes against bikes like the Harley Street models and the Kawasaki Vulcan 650, and to my eyes looks as good or better than any of those bikes. It has a unique style and doesn't look like it's trying to be a Harley, which a lot of the Japanese brands tried to do in the past. The CBR is a gorgeous sport bike. You can park it in a line of 1000cc superbikes and it won't look out of place. And someone who doesn't know about motorcycles will not be able to tell that this bike is a budget model. The new for 2019 CB500X also looks styling with a 19-inch front wheel and longer travel suspension than the previous model. I must say Honda is hiring some great designers these days because they're coming up with some pretty bikes. Whichever one you get, you won't be disappointed. Another thing to consider about Honda's 500cc lineup is the technology on all of these bikes. Because none of them make enough power to flip you over backwards, none of them have traction control. They don't really need it. They all have 6-speed gearboxes, with the Rebel being the only one without a slipper clutch. They all have a single disc out front, ABS in Canada, all bikes in Canada have ABS, and a single disc in the rear. Braking is good. To my mind, the CBR had the most initial bite, which isn't surprising as it's a sport bike. Having the longest travel suspension, the CB500X dives a little under braking, but I didn't find that tendency to be a deal breaker. The CB500X and the CBR500R get preload adjustable suspension front and back, while the Rebel is only adjustable in the back. The bare-bones Rebel is also the only one without a gear indicator or tach, although the new 2020 model adds these features as well as a beautiful LED headlight. The Rebel is the least expensive of these bikes, coming in at around $7,500 Canadian, while the other two come in around $8,000. If you want a bike that does it all, go for the CB500X. If you want a sporty ride on pavement, go for the 500R. And if you're into cruising or are in-scene challenged, go for the Rebel. Personally, I like the versatility of the 500X, but any of these bikes will make any owner happy with performance at a reasonable price and Honda reliability. They're good for a beginner, but not too boring or slow for more experienced riders. If you want a more in-depth review of any of these bikes, check out my channel where I have individual ride reviews on all of them. I appreciate a like, comment, and especially a subscription. Lots of exciting things coming up on the channel. We will be heading to the motorcycle show in a couple of days, checking out the new 2020 models, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, and may the spokes be with you.